item 9. We have Karen and Rebecca on the Karen just got a brief presentation on this.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Karen Kirkaho from the Strategic Advice Unit, and apologies from my colleague Rebecca from the Planning Unit. So the Resource Management Consenting and Other System Changes Bill was just released last night. We're expecting the bill to be introduced this afternoon. This is just an overview of where we are in the government's programme of resource management reform. We've made a number of submissions over the past year, including the fast-track consenting bill. We're now in phase 2 of the resource management reforms, which consist of 2 components. First of all, the bill, but we're also expecting amendments to national direction, and engagement on that will commence next year. We don't know the date, the closing date for the submission yet. We expect it to be referred to the Select Committee before Christmas, and they'll set the submission deadline. But we're hoping around about early to mid-February. And the phase 2 amendments are expected to be carried through to phase 3, which involves the replacement of the Resource Management Act with new spatial planning legislation and environmental protection legislation. And we're expecting phase 3 bill to be introduced in mid next year. This is a very brief overview of what the bill contains. Basically, it's a series of targeted changes to improve efficiency and effectiveness and to deliver the coalition government's commitments to double the amount of renewable energy available, to enable the delivery of high-quality infrastructure, to unlock development capacity for housing, and to enable primary sector growth and development. Obviously, we haven't had a chance to read the detail in the bill, but the main changes are around system improvements, basically changes to strengthen implementation of national direction, including enhanced ministerial intervention powers, and carrying over changes to the compliance regime, which were in the Natural and Built Environment Act. And the Council actually supported these changes, particularly around cost recovery provisions. On the infrastructure and energy package, it includes provisions to speed up consenting and extending consent durations for renewable energy and long-lived infrastructure. However, we've heard from MFE officials this excludes water infrastructure. It also provides for longer lapse dates for designations. The farming and primary sector package includes the ability to review marine farming consent conditions, faster processing for wood processing facilities, and revised legislation for farm plans. In the natural hazards and emergency response package, it will include the ability to decline consents or approve subject to conditions where there are significant risks of natural hazards. Currently, as you know, the RMA prevents us from taking an integrated planning response for natural hazards and intensification. So this bill is an opportunity to remove this constraint and allowing us to get on with planning for Auckland on these matters with less cost, delay and duplication than under the current settings. Phil Reid's workshop tomorrow will provide an update on potential changes to the Auckland Unitary Plan to better address natural hazards. And this package will also include regulation-making powers to speed up our response to emergencies. And finally, under the housing package, the bill will set out a process to opt out of the medium density residential standards. However, you should know that the detail on how to demonstrate 30 years of capacity is expected to be included in the revised National Policy Statement for Urban Development, which will be consulted on early next year. Planning staff have also advocated for provisions relating to councils that are partway through the process of amending their plan through intensification planning instruments. I know the planning division are looking at these provisions right now. And we also expect changes to the process of listing, or rather delisting, historic heritage. So submissions, we're expecting the submission to be prepared over the Christmas period, but because we don't know the deadline yet and we expect it to be in early February, we're seeking a delegation for final sign-off of the submission. Kia ora.
Thank you, Karen. Yep, pretty simple resolution. Just if by chance the submission period closes after the next committee, it will come back here for a full look and discussion about that. But we just don't want to lose the opportunity to have a say. So I'm happy to move. Anyone second? Councillor Baker second. Questions, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. Just a quick one from me. Obviously, the stuff's moving quickly, and there's some detail, in particular in relation to how Māori fit in or don't into this, may not be impacted yet. So just with reference to your Māori impact statement. So the question is, you know, if anything like that comes to light, what will be the process for trying to get feedback from iwi, mātawaka, and also, you know, our secretariat could assist. So I know that timeframes are tight, but how's that risk going to be managed should anything arise?
Yes, we haven't seen anything from the government's previous announcements around phase 2, specifically relating to Māori. The trend, however, has been to protect existing treaty settlement provisions. In terms of process, we'll follow our normal submissions process. So that will include drafting a memo tailored to Mana Whenua, basically giving them a heads up and inviting them to provide feedback which we can incorporate into council submission. And that process also involving the IMSB's Hokura Secretariat in the council's internal submission process.
Kia ora. Councillor Newman.
Thank you for the report on what is quite a complex issue for which we are really trying to preempt this, aren't we? So I wanted to give some sense as to what is your line of sight to some of the challenges in relation to the opt-out of the medium density residential standards. The advice we've received to date is that that opt-out is actually quite hard given the test for the 30 years housing growth, the capacity for that is really, it's clearly drafted by Wellingtonians as opposed to Aucklanders. So have you got any sense at this stage as to how you're likely going to be able to frame this? Because to be frank, there is a need for an opt-out, but the test for achieving that opt-out has to be more sympathetic to what we understand will happen and what the challenges we'll face in terms of our ability to meet the demand through infrastructure.
Yes, our understanding is it's setting out the process to opt out, provided councils demonstrate 30 years of housing growth. How you actually do that will probably be set out in the NPS urban development. I don't really know how that's going to go at the moment. I know our planning colleagues were advocating with officials around having Auckland-specific provisions, but I do know that there's other councils that around the country that are partway through their plan change process. I know the bill does include some provisions, but our planning colleagues are looking in detail at them at the moment. They might be able to provide an update tomorrow at the workshop.
Through the chair, if you don't mind, can I just add to that to say, yes, we do have a workshop tomorrow or a briefing with you, and we will provide as much information as we know tomorrow, which probably won't answer all your questions. And it will depend on that definition that the government has around capacity and where it goes, and in that NPSUD. So we'll do our best tomorrow as well.
If I may, through you, Chair, could I just revert to a question to Megan, if she can answer it. She might not be able to, but clearly there is a challenge that an NPS is a very, because it's an NPS, it becomes difficult to reconcile that around the need for an Auckland carve-out given our unitary plan. So are we able to, could I foreshadow that we would need to be able to address this as part of our submission, as well as the obvious need to try and address this through any regional deal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we can further talk tomorrow if that's helpful.
And Councillor Newman, myself and the Mayor and Angela Dalton wrote similar to the Minister, and then I've recently emailed the Minister too for more Auckland-focused potential carve-out, especially with the complexity of where we're at, different to others. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. My question's very specific, and it's really more that with all of these changes, I've kind of lost track of where tree protection is sitting. So is tree protection going to be something we can pursue through this, or because it was going to be in the MBE Act, where is tree protection sitting? Because, it's something we need to address.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything in the bill. I know the previous government had proposed some provisions as part of their revisions to the NPS urban development. So we might have to wait until we see the changes to national direction next year. But it's something we could maybe think about as part of the submission.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. I think, there's a focus there on housing capacity, and actually trees are part of what makes more intense housing possible and human scale. So then they shouldn't be seen in opposition, which I know was an issue with the previous government. Thank you.
Thank you. And there are no more questions, Karen, so I'll just get you to step back. Thank you very much. And we will try and get as much information out to the members as soon as we have all the information. Kia ora. Is there any debate on this one? Councillor Newman.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chair. I just want to make a couple of points, if I may. Clearly, this approval is a bit of a belts and braces should the submissions period close prior to being able to consider this in the normal meeting schedule in 2025. There is no, as I understand it, no appetite to indicate in your Chair's resolution if you're going to be supporting or opposing the submission, the bill in its current form. And the reason for that is that, as the officers have identified, rightly I think, that there are many matters that are going to need to be addressed, and it's actually about the application of a number of these points given what we know is the contrast between what the government seeks to achieve through an NPSUD and its practical application, particularly as it relates to density in Auckland. I think that this bill, and I won't be one of the authors of the submission, I think that this bill is probably going to be deficient. It's not going to allow for us to effectively opt out of the medium density residential standard. If we are having to subrogate our planning to an to a national policy statement. And the point that I would make there is that whilst I don't think that, you know, most bills you should be so strongly one way or the other, it's always, to me it's a bit of a combination thereof. In that particular part of the bill, it is very important that the government seeks to pass legislation that allows us to do precisely what we need to do to get that opt-out, because there are parts of Auckland that most definitely should not be subject to the sort of to the density standards that I think that officials from the Ministry for the Environment and others are seeking to achieve, because there are infrastructure challenges, there are challenges in relation to hazards, and quite frankly, there are character issues that need to be defended. So I hope that the timing of this will allow for further consideration by a committee of the whole, but I appreciate you taking that into consideration when you prepare the submission if you have to draft it before then.
Kia ora, Councillor. Don't think there's any other speakers to this, and I'll just, I guess, briefly speak and reply to you, Councillor Newman, as my speaking point that yes, we will be, if the timeframe doesn't fit, using our current submissions and letters and things that you have brought up as part of the submission, and we will do our best to circulate and ask for feedback as well. I think that would be important, as there is quite a lot of nuance, and what I'm hearing, the legislation will even add more nuance and more guidance to us. Of course, any future plan change will have significant amount of debate and early consultation, and then full notification as well. So there'll be several opportunities, but thank you for that. Right, all those in favour? Any opposed? No, thank you. Right, we'll go straight on to item 10.